Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and Catherine Hicks. This movie stars this cast in an epic attempt to save the planet Earth from what I like to refer to as a giant Tootsie Roll with a light bulb attached, being the space probe from another part of the galaxy that is hell-bent on destroying the planet Earth. Or is it? After an opening sequence and brief introduction from the previous film, and an introduction from the space probe itself, disrupting the USS Saratoga outside of Sector 5 near the neutral zone, we then find the crew of the Enterprise marooned temporarily on Vulcan near Monsalea with their captured Klingon vessel, affectionately named the HMS Bounty. This opens the dialogue up for us to see that Spock has been slowly progressing and working back towards being the Vulcan that we all knew him to be. And funny enough, this film has a lot of moments in it where we get to see the more whimsical side of this crew and a lot more funnier moments that I will touch on more. As I said, the probe has then arrived at Earth, causing the oceans of Earth to vaporize, sending a wailing signal at the planet that no one can identify and no one has any idea what its true intention is. Unfortunately, the President of the United Federation of Planets is forced to send out a distress signal into the Federation and the surrounding systems, warning everyone to stay away from the solar system. This prompts Admiral Kirk and party to then investigate and ultimately discover that there is one creature that used to inhabit the planet Earth that would have been able to communicate with this being and this creature, or this entity, or whatever it may be. Specifically, the humpback whale has the ability to respond to the hailing call of this probe. It's impressive to see how they come up with this correlation, and quite frankly, kind of strange that Spock comes up with the brilliant idea of traveling back in time to the mid-1980s, where they can readily find the humpback whale still thriving in the planet Earth. Although thriving would be a bit of an exaggeration in this area. The crew then, after arriving on planet Earth in circa 1986, has several what I like to call double dumbass on you moments by thinking that just because they're humans and this is their planet that they know just how to interact and how to behave. Nothing could be further from the truth. From Captain Kirk having an interaction with a cabbie and calling the names, to trying to make banter with a shopkeeper over the price of antiquities, to them discovering how the yellow pages work, all the way up to Chekhov ultimately having to ask for directions to the naval base to know where the nuclear vessels are located, thus not realizing that we are in the middle of the Cold War and Russians are the least of anybody to be trusted in the United States of America, which makes a lot of these jokes just downright hysterically funny. I wanted to take a minute to point out that this movie deals a lot with the issues of the 80s that were environmentally conscious related issues, hence where the whole saving the whales kind of concept comes from, which in all reality is a really good message to convey in the time, but it also has its tendency of getting a little on the old side after a while, because I mean, this is ultimately a Star Trek movie. It's science fiction. We're here to have fun and enjoy the intrigue and the interest of the space adventure that we're here about. Roddenberry was notorious for making his Star Trek scripts in this manner, touching on the issues of the time, but sadly, like I said, it kind of gets a little old after a while. We really see a birthing of the relationship between Kirk and Spock here. It's interesting because we're watching these characters who already know each other really well, kind of getting to know each other again in that capacity. Kirk teaching Spock, whereas for many years it was always Spock kind of teaching Kirk about the things that were important in life and reality, and now that those poles have been reversed because Spock is kind of like a teenager learning all the nuances of life and living all over again, and a nerve pinch to a punk rocker is just a great addition to this. as well as Scotty and McCoy having to learn how to figure out how to, make their way around, is to sound intelligent and to pretend like they actually know what they're talking about in the current time frame, when to them all they have to do is literally speak to a computer and tell it what to do, and they can do it. Whereas Scotty learns the hard way when picking up a computer mouse and attempting to communicate with said computer, and basically looking like an idiot in this process. Kind of like when Sulu learns how to fly the Huey 205 in this particular film, and he's still having a hard enough time trying to figure out how to do everything, and even accidentally flips on the windshield wipers. Things they would never think of, things they'd never deal with, but all in good fun. What can I say? Sadly, the scene where Chekhov gets captured by the Navy and Marine Corps and is subsequently injured in the process isn't so much about Chekhov being injured and not leaving one's comrade behind, but this is where we start watching Spock learn not only about how to deal with his Vulcan side of his personality, but ultimately where we learn a lot about him really struggling to discover his human side, which is kind of a neat thing in this film. After the whales are whisked away to the open ocean, the ones they've been intending on kidnapping in the first place to take back to the future, Admiral Kirk is forced to then chase down after rescuing Chekhov from the hospital. They are forced to chase down a whaling trawler to attempt to recover these whales, and before they are ultimately killed by the whaling trade of this time. Admittedly, seeing a Klingon bird of prey decloak above a whaling ship in the middle of the North Pacific Ocean is quite funny, if for anything else. It's just good cinema. Let's just be honest. I mean, watching the reactions of these guys, as they are seeing a UFO, if you will, in their time period, is quite comical and kind of genius if you really think about it. It probably wound up on the page of the National Enquirer or something. Weird bird-shaped UFOs chases down fishing boat. After beaming up 400 tons of whale and water into their cargo hold, the Klingon bird of prey, captained by James Kirk, then escapes Earth's gravitational field, and they slingshot back around the sun, subsequently putting them back in the 23rd century, only to have to deal with the space probe that they originally went back in time to deal with in the first place. The scene is pretty intense because as soon as they arrive, they lose power, and then they immediately go plummeting to the Earth's surface. They kind of have to get spin control on the ship, and to be quite honest, the visual effects of the bird of prey sweeping down under the Golden Gate Bridge during a massive thunderstorm and what basically looks like a typhoon is going on just looks amazing, and ultimately leading to Admiral Kirk having to pop the whales out of this ship that has sank and landed into the ocean, and ultimately saving the day. Sadly, the party is cut short for the crew of the USS Enterprise, who after basically narrowly escaping death and saving the entire planet Earth, they are still forced to deal with being court-martialed in front of their peers for disobeying orders in Star Trek III. It's sad, but I mean, unfortunately, that is part of life. Even the most heroic of deeds still sometimes require a punishment because you broke the rules. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. But ultimately, with a dozen different charges put against said crew, the only charge they put out is against Admiral Kirk. And oddly enough, they ended on the perfect note of basically giving him exactly what he's always wanted, which was to be demoted back to captain and be given command of a starship again. And what really was an amazing pull-away at the end of the film was to show that they basically made a new Enterprise for them, for him and his crew. And to see it launch off like that was just, as they said, we've come home. So, Trek fans, in the case of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, I am actually going to grade and rank this one as a 7 out of 10. to be fair, this movie is actually one of my favorite Star Trek movies, but not because of its deeply engrossing plot line or its incredibly, sincere message that it's trying to convey. In all honesty, it's just fun to watch. It's a really exciting movie. It's got a lot of action, a lot of good humor, and a lot of really enjoyable things to it. If you're a Star Trek fan, there's a lot of things you'll appreciate in this movie because there'll be things that you either wanted to see, didn't see, or at least got to at least have the opportunity to enjoy. Seeing Spock curse at things just because it's funny, and again, seeing all the crew sitting there fumbling around thinking they know exactly what they're doing because this is their home planet, not so much, but it makes it an enjoyable experience. So please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it today. Just trying to build a channel to compete with some of the other great reviewers out there. I just wanted to put that out there and say, if anybody wants to know who those reviewers are, let me know, because I'd actually give them a huge shout out, because they are some of the best that is available in the entire group of YouTube. So again, subscribe. Give me comments and questions below. If you got any suggestions for making these even more interesting, please hit me up and let me know. Thanks for watching, and we're working on it.